I can't imagine you ever saying, bring me some of the boxes that we brought back from the White House. I'd like to look at them. Did you ever do that?
I would have the right to do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
But I know you. I don't think you would do it.
Well, I don't have a lot of time, but I would have the right to do that. Right. I would do that. There'd be nothing wrong.
Let me move on.
Remember this.
Yeah.
This is the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. Do you know that they ended up paying Richard Nixon, I think, $18 million for what he had? They did the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. I have the right to look at stuff. But they have the right to talk, and we have the right to talk. This would have all been worked out. All of a sudden, they raided Mar-a-Lago, viciously raided Mar-a-Lago. I have tape, and I gave them tapes. You know, I gave them tapes of storage areas. I gave it to them. I could have held that back. I wasn't holding anything back that I cared about. I gave them tape. But you know the tape they don't want me to reveal? If possible. They've asked me, and I've so far adhered to it. The raid itself.
Wait a minute. I'll take that tape, and I'll air that tape.
Everybody would take that tape.
No matter how hard Sean Hannity tries, he just cannot stop Donald Trump from incriminating himself. Hannity here is practically begging Donald Trump to say that he didn't commit a crime by stealing documents from the federal government and then obstruct justice by defying a subpoena. And instead of just affirming Hannity's softball question, Trump can't help himself but to insist that he has the right to do what he is decidedly not legally allowed to do. Weird how Trump's lawyers don't want him to testify in court. I wonder why. But what's especially incredible about this moment is how Trump then goes on to explain at least one rationale for why he stole classified documents. Because he saw Richard Nixon do something similar and his estate got $18 million from it. In other words, Nixon was able to profit from his theft, and Donald Trump couldn't pass up the opportunity to bilk the American taxpayer one last time. And this story about Richard Nixon is actually somewhat true. Federal authorities under Congress's direction did seize Watergate documents from Nixon after his resignation in 1974 in order to guarantee that Nixon wouldn't destroy them. Nixon's estate later sued the federal government for how this process was handled, and they settled for $18 million in the year 2000. But that situation isn't at all comparable to a former president who went out of his way intentionally to take classified documents and then hide them from law enforcement. The FBI then did everything by the book. They got a search warrant, conducted a lawful search of his property. There would be no way for Trump to sue the federal government for damages because this was a legal search conducted with the approval of the court system, and one that actually proved Trump was retaining exactly what he was accused of retaining. All of which shows that Donald Trump doesn't understand what he's talking about, nor does he have a clue about the legal implications of any of his actions. All that this guy can comprehend is how he can grift as much money as humanly possible at the expense of everyone else. And as a side note, if what he's admitting publicly is that he was inspired by Richard Nixon to use his hoarding of classified documents as a scheme to rake in taxpayer money, imagine what he is not admitting publicly. Imagine the other ways he's looking to sell access to those documents and to whom. If this is just what's on the surface, imagine what's just below it. This is probably why federal law enforcement acted with the urgency that they did in the first place. It's very unlikely that they would have done that if there wasn't an obviously clear and present danger to national security. And so when Donald Trump goes on national TV to insist that he has the right to take stuff, he's only making the case for Jack Smith even stronger. And this interview comes around the same time that we just learned more details about Jack Smith's investigation and that his team has evidence of possible obstruction. I asked former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner to break down what more we've learned in my legal series, The Legal Breakdown.
Yeah, you know, Brian, it feels like the justice snowball is gaining speed, gaining mass, gaining momentum. And just when we take our eye off of the classified documents crimes down at Mar-a-Lago to keep an eye on Donald Trump's prosecution in New York, we get a big development. So we already knew that Trump was being looked at for a number of crimes, including obstructing justice by violating a subpoena that had been issued by a grand jury investigating Trump's crimes for the return of all documents. Well, today, the Washington Post has reported that there's new information coming out of Jack Smith's investigation, courtesy of unnamed sources. And that new information involves the fact that Donald Trump, after that subpoena had been issued for the return of all classified documents, some boxes were then moved from a storage facility at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump personally went through the boxes, and some of those classified documents ended up being retained unlawfully, which would constitute obstruction of justice, in violation of that subpoena. So, we've heard about obstruction before, but this puts some meat on the reporting bones, because if Donald Trump is personally rummaging through the boxes, putting his muddy little paw. If Donald Trump is personally rummaging through the boxes, putting his paws on the very classified documents that the grand jury had subpoenaed, that by law had to be returned to the federal government, boy, that is some direct evidence of Donald Trump's guilt of obstruction of justice.
Glenn, Trump was already contending with a few different possible charges in this case in particular, which include violation of the Espionage Act, unlawful retention of these documents, and obstruction of justice. So obstruction was reportedly already a part of this investigation. So how does this change things?
So, proving that Donald Trump obstructed justice, I think, was going to be a real challenge for Jack Smith. Why? Because he was going to be able to say, look, I don't put my hands on this stuff personally. I don't move boxes. I don't go through boxes. I don't look at documents. I just had my people go out and search for documents that were required to be returned under the terms of the subpoena. They returned what they returned. Maybe they failed to return some stuff. So, of course, under the bus, those people would go
right
in Trump world. But now, we have some factual reporting that no. Donald Trump was personally involved in rummaging through and at least inferentially, unlawfully retaining some of these documents. And that makes him guilty of obstructing justice. And it's much harder to point the fingers at others.
All of this is a perfect reminder that even while all the attention is fixated on the Manhattan District Attorney's case and Trump's imminent arraignment, that Trump is still contending with a raft of immensely consequential investigations, including Jack Smith's. All the while, Trump is literally building the prosecution's case against himself on national television. And let's just take a second here to contrast Trump's behavior with the classified documents from Biden's handling of those documents. There is currently a separate Justice Department probe into Biden's handling of a much smaller batch of classified documents at his home in Delaware. Biden's lawyers say they quickly handed over all classified documents found in the president's possession with no intention to obstruct the investigation or need for a subpoena or a search warrant. Biden then let federal agents go through his home voluntarily and take whatever documents they found. Meanwhile, Trump's behavior left law enforcement no choice but to issue a subpoena to him, and then when that didn't result in receiving all of the documents, they had to obtain a search warrant from a judge. Beyond that, there were reportedly far more classified documents that Trump was hiding than Biden, about 300 in total. And so now, as Glenn noted, we've learned from the Washington Post that after the subpoena was issued, Trump had rummaged through the contents of boxes of documents in his home to keep some things in his own possession, which violated the subpoena and was therefore against the law. So yeah, when it comes to Biden and Trump, these two examples aren't even on the same planet. And the fact is that the more time that goes by and the more opportunities Trump has to speak freely, the clearer that distinction between him and Biden is becoming. In a way, that's the silver lining of this entire process taking so long. It has allowed Trump to dig his own legal grave deeper and deeper with each passing day. And as the saying goes, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. Before you go, a quick announcement. I've started a Spanish YouTube channel. Democrats desperately need to be able to appeal to Spanish-speaking audiences, so this is me doing my part. To help that channel get going in the algorithm so that we can finally start spreading our progressive message and breaking the conservative stranglehold on Spanish-speaking media, please subscribe and watch a few videos. The link to that channel, called Brian Teller Cohen Espanol, is right here on this screen. And of course, to see more of my content in English, make sure to subscribe to this channel as well. The link is also right here on this screen. Thanks so much for watching.